up. So
Yeah, cool. Thank you all so very much. That was inspirational. Can we just say thanks again to Kate? My heart is going like this. Yeah, what a rock star. Yeah. So I too would like to acknowledge the Gambangia people on whose land we meet today and pay my deep respects to their elders, past, present, and future. I am the founder and CEO of OzHarvest, for any of you that don't know me. OzHarvest is Australia's leading food rescue organisation with a driving purpose to nourish our country. It began with a very simple concept: to make sure that good food did not go to landfill and rather filled bellies instead. Each week, today, we rescue over 180 tonnes of quality surplus food from more than 3,500 food donors, and we deliver that food to over 1,300 charitable organisations. Anyone who has a need to deliver food or shares food with people in need. But what I didn't know at the time, when I founded OzHarvest, that actually I was setting up a business that was steeped in the circular economy. And right now, OzHarvest has just opened a new business called the For Purpose Co. And our first business within the For Purpose Co. is called Juice for Good. And we take blemished oranges that are not sellable, and they're in a vending machine. So we have 34 freestanding vending machines selling fresh orange juice in biodegradable cups with straws that we had specially made from sugarcane that now will be coming into the market. So again, everything we do is about the circular economy. Thank you. So in essence, the circular economy values are about resources by keeping products and material in use for as long as possible. It brings major economic, social, and environmental benefits, and it contributes significantly to innovation, to growth, to our economy, and it reduces impact on our environment. So today, I'm very excited to invite 4 people up to be with us, and I don't know why they aren't here already. Can I have Barbara, Ian, Matthew, and Terry please come and join us? Our grandparents knew what to do. They didn't need the term circular economy. Let us find out a little bit about each of our 4 panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. So could you very briefly, each of you, you have about 1.5 minutes to share who you are and why the circular economy is important and part of what you do.
Cool. I can start. So my name's Matt Allen. I head up Zero Waste Network, and we are a network of social enterprises in the circular economy. And the circular economy is important to what we do because we see ourselves as advocates for an approach to circular economy that brings along the community, that creates opportunities for people experiencing disadvantage, and that addresses what we see as the real issue in the circular economy, which is how to keep materials in productive use for as long as possible, which means looking to those activities like reuse and repair that are at the heart of the circular economy model, yet seem to be missing from many current approaches.
Awesome. Can you pass on? Yes, Barbara?
Hi everyone, I'm Barbara. I'm the General Manager of Garage Sale Trail. So for those of you that don't know us, it could sound a little bit crazy, an organisation all about garage sales, but basically what we do is we recirculate 4.6 million items from one single weekend of garage sales every year. And it's not just about that one weekend for us, although that is important, as it gets 350,000 Australians engaged in reuse. For us, it's actually about the education piece as well. So we all love, every Australian knows and loves garage sales. It's a really simple entry point to the circular economy for Australians. And therefore, that makes it really easy for us to have a really engaging discussion with the country and run a really good media campaign that really gets people thinking about the steps they can take to be part of the circular economy. The last thing I'll say, and it's interesting because I'm very privileged to work with many of the councils in this room. We work with 150 councils across Australia who very much make it all happen. One of the things I talk to councils a lot about at the moment is about how do we become more circular and sustainable within our own organisations, whether that's at council or within Garage Cell Trail. So we're now looking at how do we become more circular within our organisation. So a tiny example is we have loads of promotional banners. We've now got this fabulous artist called Jeff McCann who's turning all of those banners into items that we can use, like jackets and blazers, that we can use to stimulate discussion and talk about the circular economy.
Beautiful, thank you. Ian, would you like to go next?
Yeah, certainly. Hello, everyone. My name's Ian Stopple. I used to be the General Manager of Auckland Council, the waste team there, and I was there for 6 years up until last year, which is probably where I got my interest and knowledge in circular economy. Auckland had a zero waste policy or strategy and tried to deliver some of that through industry, through working with social enterprises, through a social procurement approach, worked with actually Kiwi Harvest, so coming out of Oz Harvest. Since leaving Auckland, I split my time. I do some work for SLR Consulting, predominantly supporting local government on waste strategy and infrastructure for resource recovery. But predominantly I work with social enterprises. So I sit on the board of a couple of community recyclers and also work for Zero Waste Network New Zealand, who have just established a company called Localised, which seeks to joint venture with community organisations, working with councils to try and win council contracts to operate community recycling centres. So at the heart of that, it's around people, communities, supporting, engaging and I guess mentoring those based on the principles of social and environmental value and obviously key to circular economy principles.
Beautiful, thank you. Terry, last but
Thanks,
definitely not least.
Thank you. Am I on air? I am? Yes? Okay. Hi everybody, my name's Terry O'Neill. I see a few familiar faces around the room today, so I hope the story's going to be the same as it usually is. You said a minute and a half, I think, Ronnie. I've actually got two hats. I think that's 45 seconds each hat as we go, so I'll talk really quickly. Everyone, I'm the CEO of a charity in Brisbane by the name of Link Vision, and we actually look after people with low and no vision. And importantly, about 45% of the income of the charity comes from our op shops. So we have a very, very great interest in the circular economy and the quality of the goods that are coming through as well. In addition to that, Link Vision is also a member of the charitable, NACRO, National Association of Charitable Recycling Organisations, and I have the privilege of serving as Vice President of that organisation. Members of NACRO typically will be people like Salvo Stores, Red Cross, Lifeline, and a number of other organisations that you've all heard of. And that's me.
Awesome. So we obviously have a very esteemed panel who are well-versed in circular economy. But we heard Kate mention the word excitement, the excitement. So what I want to hear is your excitement. And what is your vision? And perhaps, maybe I'll start with you, Ian. Your vision for a circular economy in Australia. Because clearly we're not all doing it. Yet.
Well, I'm actually based in Auckland and never worked in Australia, so I'm probably not the right
well,
person.
then don't you answer.
But I
We won't let you
I
answer.
can suggest, I guess there's a lot of learnings across the ditch. And New Zealand has done some really good stuff, and I think is way behind compared to other jurisdictions. I think probably Kate touched on it. It is a... Does this work okay? Yep.
Are you hearing? Is that clear enough? Okay.
A lot of it is around collaboration. I think it's really key, certainly in the New Zealand context, around the right policy framework. New Zealand has a $10 levy. It doesn't have particularly good national waste data collection. Doesn't have any national infrastructure planning, doesn't have any mandatory product stewardship schemes. So it's way behind on some of those principles. There's a lot of talk, a lot of theory, a lot of collective minds coming together. But I think as Kate suggested, and that's the beauty of social enterprises, they're doing it day in, day out. They're the shop window. And I think that's the thing that, it's great working in the waste industry, but I think the real cool cats are in the social enterprise sector. And what they do day in, day out is, I think, the things that excite around repurposing, repair, and the educational piece as well. I think the key thing is about collaboration, so it's the government giving the right signals to industry, to local government, so they can invest, innovate, and then get the social enterprise, community sector involved in doing some of the doing, creating jobs, creating local environmental and social impact.
Matt, would you like to add to that? What is your vision for the circular economy in Australia?
So I guess my vision for circular economy in Australia is one where every resident has access to reuse and repair hubs where they can take items they no longer want, and those can be repurposed ideally or repaired and then put back into the productive economy, where those hubs are run predominantly by organisations with a social and environmental purpose that are there because they want to see more opportunities created and more supports often for people who experience disadvantage and barriers to employment. And at the same time that those points of contact with the reuse and repair economy give people a sense of their own connectedness to the materials, and that we move beyond what we currently have in the country, in Australia, which is very much a take, make and dispose approach, and that is reflected in the emerging discussion around circular economy, where we will just have more advanced forms of disposing of materials at the end of their productive life, and they may be turned into more things through advanced manufacturing, but the responsibility for the individual consumer is still ends when they throw it in the bin or when they discard of it. And I want to see an approach where people have a sense of responsibility for it right through until the point where it goes into its next productive life.
So Barbara, given that you work with, did you say 350,000 residents who are clearly recycling and making good use of the garage sale, what are the current gaps in our approach? I mean, your initiative is one approach, and it's 1 day a year.
Yeah.
But could you share with us
Yeah,
your
sure.
view of the current gaps
Yeah,
in our
sure.
approach to the circular economy?
Of course, and I guess where I come from is what we've learnt over delivering the program for nearly 9 years now is how it's worked for us, and how I see it working on a bigger scale within Australia as well. Is it's all about collaboration. Exactly what Ian was saying. If we can collaborate and get a shared vision, get people together with a shared vision, and together we can then motivate lots of people to take simple actions, we can have a big collective impact. That's really the philosophy that we built Garage Sale Trail on. And I've been very lucky actually to be part of an Australia Post panel on circular economy for a number of years now, and we've been working on a program called Revamp, which part of that's about textile waste and how do we make sure uniforms for employers as big as Australia Post are truly circular. And that the big learnings we had from that very much reflected the learnings we've had from Garage Sale Trail, which are the things we need businesses on board. We need a really clear business case, because the reality is, as Ronnie said, is the circular economy is good for everyone. It's good for business, it's good socially, it's good environmentally. And we need to make it easy for people to be involved as well.
So just before I move on to you, Terry, a quick one for you, Barbara. If this Garage Sale Trail, which is a beautiful idea and brilliant, and it happens once a year and engages 350,000 people, do you have a vision to scale that up, to make that happen 4 times a year as opposed to just once? I understand the logistics of organising it is huge.
Absolutely. You know, that's very much where we're headed, and very much what we want to do is scale our impact and take the event to being more than once a year. So that's absolutely where we want to be. I mean, to go back to Kate and her dream, you know, our big dream is ultimately through a circular economy to have a zero waste society, and we want to play a role in helping to create that by collaborating with governments and business and all those that should be involved.
Terry, what are the most important steps that government need to take to move towards this shift? We're hearing collaboration. We know how good it is for business. We know how good it is for the economy.
Yeah,
Can you?
It's actually a really good point. Not just to go back a couple of steps from today, we heard from Costa and we've heard from Kate also about the importance of collaboration, commitment, buy-in, all those sort of things. And the thing that really impresses me, and you talked about excitement before, the thing that really excites me about today is that every single person in this room is doing something. And I think that's a really important thing, and that's something that I've picked up from everything that I've heard today so far. What I think needs to happen, and it's probably touching on something that Kate mentioned before as well, is that whilst all of us in our own little groups are doing something, and we know councils are doing something, and in some areas state governments are doing something, there's nothing really exciting coming out of the feds. And to me, the most important thing then is to have that national strategy. And let's put something on paper and let's outline it and let's get everybody, all of the interest groups involved as part of that national strategy. And then I think we're really starting to kick some goals.
Beautiful. Thank you. Probably Matt and Terry are best to answer this, but any one of you can. What role should charities and non-profits play in Australia's circular economy? Obviously, you guys are already doing it so much. We are already doing it as well. So, yeah.
We're playing the role of good garbos every now and again, I can tell you, and it'd be really good to get away from that as well. I think from a charity point of view, the really important thing is once again to be part of that national focus and the focus on certainly in terms of reusing and recycling good donated goods. I think that's important. And I think, Matt, you said before that one of the important things is let's not talk about reusing or recycling once. Let's do it the second time or the third time or as many times as we possibly can. To me, that's a really important role of charities.
Sorry, can I just ask you something further? So you represent the National Association of Charitable Recycling Organisations. How many are there? How many charitable organisations are part of your organisation?
Oh, there's around about 50 all up. So it basically ranges from some of the really large organisations, and that's why I mentioned them before, because
like the
they're
Salvos.
household names, right? But you know, the charity that I run is actually one of the medium to smaller charities. So there's around about 50 active members right now. Okay.
Cool. Matt, did you want to?
So
add some-
the role that,
yeah.
well, I mean, yeah, if you ask me, a central role. I think what we can bring to the conversation about circular economy as non-profits, charities and social enterprises is to demonstrate what a labour-intensive as opposed to a capital-intensive approach to this work looks like. So actually, can someone tell me what's the 10,000 tonnes of waste, what's the figure per 10,000 tonnes of waste? Is it like 8.2 full-time equivalent positions? Is that the 9.5 is what we're at? Cool, 9.5. And landfilling's what, 3.2? So reuse is 195. So that figure is based on a study that we commissioned from in partnership with the Office of Environment and Heritage, and then a further research piece that we did in a 6-week period with a bunch of our members, and it's backed up by figures that have come out of Europe, particularly Scotland. So in terms of the opportunity for employment creation and a labour-intensive approach to this work, it's the social enterprise sector demonstrates what's possible in the circular economy. And yes, not every single tonne of material that's currently recycled is suitable for reuse. But I can definitely tell you, as someone that's been an operator of a reuse operation and now working in a peak body, that a lot of what is currently sent for landfilling and recyclable would be reusable. And it has been for the last, however many years, in the case of charities, like over 100 years. In the case of social enterprises like our members, for decades, we've in many ways been leading the way in trying to ensure things are reused and kept in a productive economy for as long as possible, and that in doing so we create as many opportunities for people to find work as we can.
So when you mentioned the 6-week intensive thing you did, can you just explain what you did over 6 weeks that has informed how you work now, or what can we learn from that?
Okay, so we, in partnership with SSROC, the Southern Sydney Regional Organisation of Councils, we put together a research study which looked at the activities of 4 sites over 6 weeks, and so we captured quite a high level of data on the materials that they were accepting and selling for reuse, as well as their employment figures and their sales figures over the counter. So this was perhaps like the first intensive study of reuse enterprises that had been done, certainly the first that we'd been able to find in Australia. So what that did was make a first step towards counting what is occurring in the world of reuse, because to make it real, I mean, reuse isn't considered in the same world as recycling, really. We don't account for reuse in the same way as we account for recycling. We don't measure reuse across a weighbridge. It's not necessarily considered in the waste management picture in the way it should be, because recycling is something that we agree as a sector should be done, and therefore we counter, and therefore state governments and the regulators support it and regulate for it. But reuse seems to sit outside of that for some reason, and our perspective after looking at how that data could be collected is to say, let's start collecting that information about reuse activity, and let's start looking at specific targeted programs to support those forms of reuse that are most effective, and to support those forms of reuse which are ready to go right away. The solutions are there already, but they're just lacking any kind of signal from the regulators, from the state government and federal government around them wanting to see that happen as an outcome. And when we're talking about circular economy, for those activities that sit at the heart of the circular economy to be missing from the model, we have an opportunity to put those activities in the model. And if we don't do so, I think it'll be a missed opportunity.
Thank you. Ian, how can councils and social enterprises partner better to deliver social and environmental outcomes?
When I was at Auckland, and Auckland's still doing some work in this space, looking at social procurement was a way forward, particularly looking at dealing with particular waste streams, particularly bulky waste or community recycling centre waste. And what I mean by that was you're looking at building capacity so community organisations could tender for council contracts, and the evaluation wasn't traditionally the 60 or 70% price, but actually probably only 25% price. The rest was looking at social outcomes, environmental outcomes, cultural, the opportunities to create volunteer opportunities, to assist people get back into the workspace. So a lot of the social value. I think and I guess some of the bolder councils in New Zealand are going down that approach. One of the pieces of work that the Zero Waste Network in New Zealand are doing is trying to work and build that capacity, because there's a lot of community organisations that want to get in the space, they see the value, but actually they don't really know what to do. And councils, naturally are going to be risk averse and think, well, actually it's a big step to take to award a 5-10 year contract. So building that capacity, working together, so actually community organisations, social enterprises understand the council's way of procurement, because councils obviously work in a particular way, and quite rightly, but it's not always easily understood. And I think just building that almost an open book approach, that there's that pain and gain together. Just coming back to what Matt was saying, one of the examples where actually that's worked quite well in New Zealand, particularly Auckland, is with Housing New Zealand. Housing New Zealand own the government housing stock, social housing, and they're demolishing, or they have been demolishing, a lot of old council houses, state houses that are 50, 60 years old. And traditionally, a state house is 25 tonnes, it's bulldozed, and it all goes off to landfill. There's a lot of work that's being done, trialling and Auckland Council have been involved with this, looking at deconstruction. So getting community organisations in to deconstruct houses, not necessarily on site, but take them away. And the recovery of the material is as high as 70%. And a lot of these state houses have got native timber, so kauri. So actually now people are using these materials, not necessarily to go back into new homes, but actually doing some really cool stuff with them.
Beautiful.
And the real plus is that a lot of people who are living in these state houses would see, who are going to be moved elsewhere, would see their house demolished. And clearly, there's a strong attachment to that. The idea that their home is going to be used elsewhere, again, just gives a different dimension to the circular economy.
It's about the storytelling,
It's
isn't
about
it?
emotions
and
as
about
well.
connecting with that. Barbara, did you want to add anything, or Terry, about how can councils and social enterprises partner, since you couldn't do the Garage Sale Trail without your partnership with 150 councils?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the main thing for us, talking very personally about the work we do at Garage Sale Trail, is that the whole initiative is a collaboration. It's us working as a not-for-profit social enterprise with 150 councils, with state government, with private sector, and it just would not be possible if we didn't work together. And the impacts that we achieve are, without doubt, the sum total of all the inputs and all the valued contributions of all those parts. It just doesn't come down to us.
I just wonder if I could just make one quick comment about something that Ian mentioned before. It's not related to this particular subject,
Sure.
but in terms of reuse and recycling, I have a very good friend who's from your home country, Ian, he taught me the biggest lesson not long ago. He's just in the middle of renovating his house, and to do that he had to pull down half the house. House is very old, so about half of the house has been pulled down. The builder delivered a skip bin. He said, take that away, I'm recycling all of this. There was a whole heap of hardwood. He took every single nail out of the hardwood and recycled it through the metal recycler. He stripped all the electricals down and recycled the copper and all the wire. He then cut all of the hardwood into equal parts because one of his friends was building a garage at home. So he actually cut everything to size. And then all of that was left then was corrugated iron, and he cut that down to size for another friend of his who was building a chicken coop.
Well, imagine if we all could do that.
And it got better because he then broke up all the concreting because they had to lay some new concrete paths, and gave that to a council for fill.
Amazing.
So he's actually recycled every single thing that came out of his old house. And I said to him, so what brought that on? He said, well, I come from New Zealand and that's how I was taught. And we did that when I was a boy. So he's really going back to what he used to do.
Well, it's about our grandparents didn't need to learn about the circular economy. They didn't just throw everything away.
It existed and
Yeah.
still exists.
Yeah. How do we sustain continuous and long-term action when the transition is often so complex? Any one of you want to answer that? Silence? Yeah, this is not meant to be easy. This is taxing our brains so that they can be not only entertained,
Anybody
but
out
learn
there?
something. They'll have an opportunity to ask you questions, I think. How are we going for time? How many? Oh, beautiful. We've got so much time. So now you can answer the question. Please, do you need the question again?
No, I'll have a go.
Do you
but
need the
it'll be
question
short.
again? How do we sustain continuous and long-term action when the transition is often so complex?
So I think there's a lot of good stuff going on already. So it's as we touched on, it's not new, and it's probably just highlighting. So there's a lot of discussion at a high level around circular economy. It can be a bit academic, theoretical, and I think people do struggle sometimes to think, well, what's the bigger picture? But actually, if you start looking at it from a bottom up, there's a lot of great stuff that's going on, like your organisation, Ronnie, that have been doing this and actually haven't called it circular economy. And I suppose the principles of zero waste are circular economy. So community recycling centres or any organisation that's diverting 70+% of waste, well, that's nearer zero waste than it's not zero waste. So I think it's probably highlighting the the low-hanging fruit that's happening at the moment, and the harder. I'm not saying that's easy to achieve, but actually just try and tell those stories, which again is some of the stuff that's come out, so that actually when government do look to legislate, they actually understand what the impact is on the ground to people and to communities.
Yeah, I would say don't complexify what is simple, and the simple thing is that we've come a long way from, in many ways, previous approaches that were more circular, and for example, deconstructing houses rather than just knocking them down. For example, reusing milk bottles rather than assuming that you'll throw away the packaging that your milk came in. A lot of the things that we talk about, I mean, and absolutely agree that the conversation is often quite academic, and tends to focus on industrial scale solutions to a problem that is definitely industrial scale, but I think in some ways the action is simple. We just need to prioritise or to develop the strategies, and governments need to develop the strategies based on the waste hierarchy. We don't need to reinvent it. It's waste avoidance and reduction, and then if we can't do that, it's reusing it, and then like as a last resort, then we're recycling it. But we're approaching it with that pyramid turned completely on its head, and all due respect to all of the enterprises involved in recycling, and my organisations from my own network as well that do recycling, but it's not the first port of call, and it shouldn't be taking up 80% of the bandwidth on this issue. And so yeah, let's just not make it.
Yeah. Great.
Let's not make it too complex.
Barbara.
I might be going a little bit off topic, but just in reaction to Matt there, I think it can easily also get quite depressing and quite challenging in these circumstances to start thinking that the only way things can change is through through federal legislation and changes at government. I think we can't forget that the power each of us have and every individual has as a consumer in this world as well. And that's effectively what Garage Cell Trail is about. It's about actually the actions of lots of individuals. Doing a simple thing can actually have a major impact. We don't, yes, absolutely, in a dream world, we need federal legislation to change. We need targets around reuse, but we also need to stand up and realise as consumers we have power. Businesses aren't the big bad wolf. They're often just responding to demand, and we as individuals and community members have the power to make a really big difference.
Cool, thank you. Terry.
It's a tough one to follow, that one, isn't it? I think you're right. I mean, the important thing is that I think I said before that there's certain levels in terms of involvement. There's the local level, the enterprise level, the council level, state government, federal government level, and I think the important thing is that, as I said before, we're already all doing something. So how good is that? Matt's right. Let's not complicate it, because it doesn't need to be that complicated, because the fact is we're already doing something anyway. It's just a matter of coordinating it from here, and I think what we need to do is to realise, and once again from something that Matt said, that we have come part of the journey already, so let's build on it from there. We're not starting from scratch anymore.
Beautiful. I do think you need to remember we are talking to the converted here, which is always such an awesome thing, but our challenge, of course, is outside of this room. So, based on the outside of this room, what is the one biggest thing that we can all do to move to a circular economy? You've each got an opportunity to answer that. And then in the meanwhile, if any of you have got questions that you'd like to ask, think about them, because we will give you an opportunity. We'll have a few minutes to give you an opportunity to either share something or ask a question.
I guess it's me. I'd probably answer that by saying I'm not sure that there is one single thing. I think there's probably a number of things. That sounds like a cop-out, I know. But to me, once again, if I had to pick one thing, it is about a national focus. I just feel so strongly about that because we've already got local, we've got council, we've got, in some cases, state, but we certainly don't seem to have a national focus. So to me, that would be the next step.
And I guess from me, and looking at it from a slightly different perspective as a circular economy educator, perhaps, and talking to lots of educators in the room, is just to keep it simple. I think that's one of the biggest things we can do and make the actions we want people to take simple.
Oh, do I get to wave a magic wand? Is that the...
Yeah, that's what I'm actually saying. If you could wave a magic wand, what would it be? Because we have 90 councils in this space. We have government representatives listening to us here.
Yeah, I
This is
suppose
our
that
opportunity.
there would be more, just that there would be resources, capacity, and I guess, yeah, just space for community enterprises to step into the role that they want to play in this space because they're there, they are keen, and absolutely have the capacities and the models that can work, and that in order to do so, that we will need partnerships and we'll need collaborations with all levels of government, and so for those relationships to be built and sustained and turned into practical solutions where the residents can access would be my wish. So replace the R in MRF with reuse, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Probably for New Zealand, I think probably Tara's right. There's not one thing, but I think a product stewardship scheme of some description, maybe container deposits, I think would give a clear signal, get rid of maybe some of the literal rubbish packaging that's out there at the moment, or at least producers take responsibility and need to innovate and take accountability. So it doesn't sit on the ratepayer, it doesn't sit on councils or even the resident to try and work out what the right or wrong thing is to do. And I think the beauty of that, certainly in New Zealand and the network of community recycling centres, is that it would spark a whole revenue stream for social enterprises and would transform some of those communities. And then you get the power of those communities realising what resource recovery, reuse is really all about.
Beautiful. So I guess we've heard how each of our 4 members of the panel are doing extraordinary things in the space, getting out and doing it. We have heard before from Kate how her wish, and I have to say I have to agree with her, that if whatever government comes into power takes that it becomes a national issue, that we do what we need to do to save our planet. A circular economy is obviously so incredibly powerful. Just through revisiting some of these age-old approaches, we know that we have solutions. But we do have a few minutes left, so I wondered whether anybody, and we have a question right here, so if you would like, yeah, thank you.
Alan Hazelden, Hillshire Council. Thanks for the interesting conversation. I'd like the panel's views on the underlying reality that consumer consumption is an underpinning factor in our local economy, and that manufacturing generally is an underpinning component, a major underpinning component of global economic activity.
Do you understand?
Yeah, I can cover that. So there was 2 things: product consumption, global manufacturing. People buy stuff is an easier one to respond to, but I think I'll respond to the first one. So, reuse is economic activity. Reuse and not-for-profit work. Everything we're talking about is economic activity. It's economic activity which involves recirculation of an item. It doesn't mean that it's not being bought and sold. So, in terms of the extent to which people's purchasing behaviours are unchangeable. Like, I don't know if that's the case. Like, I think last year we were talking about the example of the Flanders region in Belgium, where 1 in 5 people shop regularly at a reuse shop, and where there's a region-wide network of reuse operations that are creating, turning over millions of dollars every year, millions of euros every year, and putting money back into the local economy. So I think that actually we're not talking about degrowthing the economy. We're talking about recirculating activity in more local economies, and often these enterprises are embedded in their local context and are putting resources back into their communities. So I think that more of the money stays in Australia if more of the materials and more of the items that are purchased in Australia get recirculated in that context. So will we always import most of what we need from other countries? Perhaps. I can't answer that question, but I can say that the examples are out there from all around the world of how we can be more resourceful with the things that do end up in this country. Does that answer your question?
I guess to an extent. But you've got, if we just look at China as an example, here's this colossal manufacturing powerhouse, which is turning. In China, just as the major example, here's this industrial powerhouse turning raw materials into consumer goods. This is happening all over the world, and in fact, it's increasing, not decreasing.
So our challenge, I would beg to ask, is it's the same thing when people say to me, what about the supermarkets? When are they going to change? When will they have less of this or more of that? And I look at them and I say, when you don't walk into the supermarket to buy that. So we are responsible. We cannot absolve ourselves of the responsibility that as China makes more, we're buying more. So fundamentally, we have to break that cycle of convenience, of price. Would anyone agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess I've got two bits of data kind of wanting to poke out of my head to share with you all. I was reading some data from the World Economic Forum recently, which was showing that in the States, at least, the second-hand economy is actually, in terms of growth, is outstripping the retail economy, which is good, nice, promising signs from that perspective. And the other thing, one of the things we find on a very local level with Garage Sale Trail is we have this amazing research company that go out and find out what's actually happening on the ground over the Garage Sale Trail weekend. And this always shocks me, and I think quite a lot of our partner councils. Quarter of the people who shop on our weekend haven't been second-hand shopping prior to that time of the year, which means there's still quite a lot of work to do. But when you're looking at the figures overall, internationally, currently, second-hand economy is, in terms of growth, outstripping. So that's good to see.
We have time for one more question if there is. There's one on this side.
Hello, I'm Gail Seddon, Metropolitan Waste and Resource Recovery Group in Victoria. We're introducing an e-waste ban in Victoria, and I know from some pilot projects we've had around reuse of e-waste and repair of e-waste, they're really, really popular with the community. That idea of scaling up that sort of model, I think, is something that we'd love to talk more about in terms of what we could be doing with the community recycling networks and the zero waste network, because I think that the community actually want that. And one of the things, the barriers holding back were things around the repair side and the the electronic goods needing electricians to actually do the testing and tagging. So, definitely from Bright Sparks, which was a program that was piloted, you might have heard of it, in Victoria. It was really popular. It proved a lot about the types of materials and where they were coming from and where they were going. So, just really an open conversation to follow up, I think, but would love your thoughts on e-waste, because it really is something that we're facing right now.
Yeah, that's a really tough one, and I think it changes by area. I mean, I could probably answer that with my charity hat on now, and I can tell you that religiously we actually test and tag absolutely everything, so that we will use absolutely everything that is tested to be A, safe, and B, working. And I think that's a really important thing, and I see that a number of other charities are doing exactly the same thing as well at the moment. In addition to that, there's also some external markets outside of Australia for e-waste, as long as it's working. So at least that sort of thing is starting to happen now. In terms of repairs, it's almost impossible, and I think it's something that Matt picked up on before. You know, charities certainly don't have that expertise, so there's still that challenge on what to do with what is not repairable. And I don't have an answer for that one yet, but we're working on it.
Well, it's a beautiful challenge for people who are unemployed. We could train them. I think on that note, I want to thank you all so very much for your wisdom, for your input. Thank you all for listening. I think it's very clear the time is ripe. We all are part of the action required, collaboration and togetherness and heart and love, and telling the story of converting why we should be reusing, reducing, repurposing is just so very clear to create the circular economy that actually will improve our country. So thank you all very, very much for this. Thank you, guys.